Better World Blueprint. Good humans doing good things.
Switch on the radio or TV and you'll hear about conflict and crisis. But that's not the whole picture. Everywhere, ordinary people are doing extraordinary things. And this podcast is about those people. I'm Siobhan Hunt, and I believe these stories can inspire us all. Welcome to A Better World Blueprint. Right now, everywhere you go, you'll hear Christmas carols. Your to-do list is probably in overdrive. Welcome to the silly season, where sometimes it just feels plain stressful. Andrew Sloan is a psychotherapist who says that you are not alone. And it's not because you're broken. It's because the world is. His book, Why Things Feel Fucked, Your Practical Guide to Getting Unstuck, offers us all a way back to peace in the chaos. This is my chat with Andrew Sloan, psychotherapist and author. Andrew, welcome to A Better World Blueprint.
Thank you for having me, Siobhan. It's so good to be with you.
You write in the introduction that your book, Why Things Feel Fucked, that this is something that you're taking one step at a time, getting towards a better world. And it made me think of one of my yoga teachers who, previous to being a yoga teacher, had been in environmental work. And she said that she just saw these problems were so big and she was trying to get her head around how she could affect change. And she started teaching yoga at the same time. And she could see that the difference she made on an individual level had greater potential to change things through a ripple effect than the kind of problems she was trying to tackle on that global scale. I mean, does that resonate with you at all in the work that you do?
Tremendously, because I work in the organizational and team-based setting context as well. And I have found a way in the past 10 years to get really frustrated in the system of work when I'm invited in to help transform it, that it feels sticky and stuck, and it feels like it trends to fear-based dominant, experiences. And we know fear evaporates the nerve endings and neural circuits in our bodies around calm connection and our ability to be safely connected with each other. And I then would close the laptop, so to speak, on the workshop or the online conversation or the thing I was doing inside of a team, and I would shift to my private practice and go, wow, the transformation, the evolution, the ripple effect, as you've just named, in that person's life, it's beyond what I could imagine. My wildest dreams are happening on this one-to-one level. And it really was a turning point in my work inside of teams when I was like, I can no longer do that work that's inside of a system that's broken without the contact time that I need one-to-one with very senior leaders to change the paradigm. And yeah, it has evolved my work inside of teams because now I partner much more closely with the most senior leader. And then I'm invited into one-on-one conversations with their leaders and their teams. And then we go about doing the same, not the same sort of work we do in therapy, of course, but we actually get to transform people's lives and their posture in the world. And when we can shift their posture, we change what happens on the inside of them, but then we change how they share power with others versus take it from others. And then the whole world changes again,
Well, I was wondering if you could tell me about the ripple effects, give me some practical examples of, let's say you work with a CEO of a company whose focus is on profits and everyone's working extra hours and everyone's burnt out, all that sort of stuff. How does working with him in that one-to-one, how does that impact a working environment?
Yeah, I used to call myself just a coach. And then I found myself doing therapy with these people, in organizational settings. And I was like, you got to be honest. I'm a psychotherapist first. And sure, we might get to solutions, we might get to solves, but we don't get it through my advice. We get it through you. And so I started calling it what it was, and the people that really wanted to transform were keen, and they work with me. You asked this question, I think, about a CEO who I've been working with for over 4 years now, and their team, and they were very reluctant to start with, very skeptical, and their business partner brought me into this context, and through many changes had to leave, and I'm with this skeptical leader, and they started to see the transformation of this safe space. Because I believe therapy is first and foremost what we always needed. Therapy isn't what we need now because we're fucked or we're fucking it up. Therapy is the safe, connected, judgment-free, shame-reducing, connective relationship that our nervous system's always needed. We're just replicating it for pay right now. We're just dosing it out as much as possible to help people to connect back to themselves and others in their lives. And so I do the same thing in the organizational context. But what happened with this particular leader is their transformation, their evolution towards a grounded nervous system and more constructive ways of being had this outsized impact on the other leaders. And they had their own versions of skepticism, because skepticism it's not the same for everyone. And we've been working with this senior leadership team of 4 people for about 2 years, and they have literally fundamentally changed their entire experiences in the world. From literally taking power over people and telling people what to do, and all of the ripple effect of that in their organization. They had a lot of team members who would sort of default to taking over work from others rather than coaching and challenging people to step up and contribute their own value. As an example, we would have technical meetings without the human in the room. And so a lot of tech speak, a lot of tasks and deliverables. And as we know, great teams, great organizations center care and the human experience inside of them to be the foundation for great work. And now they've got regular, meaningful conversations with a purposeful scaffold around, are you clear on what great looks like? Are you freed up to achieve that goal, that objective in your own unique way? Do I see you as a whole human in and out of work? Do I care just as much as your life outside of work as what you contribute in it? Am I hearing you? Does your opinion count? And are you able to stretch, learn, and grow? It's these conversations that now can unfold because they're more in their own version of that. And now that the leader is in their own version of that, they can actually support others towards that as well. I say leadership is self-leadership first. And that is what we get to help leaders do in this context, in this way. The ripple effect is vast. It is vast.
And what about individuals on a one-to-one basis that it's not within the corporate world, it's not within business, it's someone who is just coming to speak to you and work some stuff out. How does getting on top of that stuff help change the world, do you think?
Well, it's such a localized ripple, right, from that person, that human, out into their lives. It's really remarkably similar, though, to what happens in workplaces, because it's the same human transforming and then it affects everything else. And on the flip of this, in workplaces, I hear the effect doesn't just last in the workplace. It doesn't just create more productivity. In the science, it actually improves net thriving by 68% when we answer some of those questions in the corporate environment. And what I often get is people say, actually, this stuff that we're doing at work around meaningful conversations is actually changing the way I have a relationship with my intimate partner. It's changing the way that I have conversations with my friends. So we take that out of the work context and we put it in the context of people funding and investing in this for themselves. They are so sick of feeling stuck. They are so sick of not knowing how to move out of the fuck in their lives, and they're investing it in themselves. It has, I think, just a stronger ripple effect because it literally affects children that they're parenting. It affects their spouse, their partners, their friendships, their relationships with their families. And then it sort of goes back into affect their work. And so at the end of the day, that person who's self-funding therapy, they then show up as a better leader, a better, a human who's more orientated to net thriving inside of their workplaces. And unfortunately, because we are in the setup we're in, capitalistic society we are living in, work is the majority of our time. Work is the majority of our energy. This is how we've set it up. But yeah, these ripple effects take the very, very private and the personal and the intimate, and they make them, I think the ripple effect is in the chain of relationships and the chain of connection that then happens. Now, I think we've got a bit of a stagnant problem in our community. We've got a lot of people in therapy. We've got a lot of people in change. We've got a lot of people in maybe yoga practices and beyond and meditation practices. But how do we get those experiences off the mat, so to speak, and into the systems around us? I think is our next frontier, because we're facing an ecological disaster, right? We are facing a crisis at work. Only 14% of knowledge workers in Australia have a healthy relationship with work. We're facing a technological revolution in artificial intelligence, which we don't know if it's going to help or hinder our lives. And so how do we continue to create, and I'm going to steal some of your language here that's actually in the book, how do we create belonging from those private places of reconnecting to ourselves, wherever they might be? And therapy is not the only answer, but how do we take them and infuse them into our systems? How humans show up with other humans is something that I wrote the last chapter for. I wrote the last chapter for myself more than just the reader. I was like, I need to figure this out too. Like, how do we actually bring this into systems? How do we take this so that we can have a better, healthier world? And I mean world in and around us, not just the big global world, but how do we make our worlds better? This is still a Rubik's Cube for me.
Well, it's on some levels so basic, isn't it? That idea of human connection and I think being heart-led, like being compassionate. It just seems like a no-brainer, and yet it is something that we find so lacking in everyday life. And if we just applied a little bit of it, so much would change, wouldn't it?
It would change everything. And it is simple, but it's really hard to find, because the first priority in our ancient circuits inside of our body is fear and protection. And in the hierarchy of things, it is the first thing. It is the first thing to activate, and it occludes, it covers up the circuitry inside of our bodies for compassion. And it actually shrinks the neural flow into the front two parts of our brain for logic and empathy. And you talk about heart-led, this part of our nervous system, which is calm, spacious, and tranquil at times, is the connection between our brain, the mass of neurons in our brain, 100 billion neurons, and the 40 to 70,000 neurons in our heart center, and the 100 million neurons in our guts. We only have a flow of that information down into our body and back up again when we are in safety, not fear. And so if the world is hammering us into fear-based states, which is what I think the industrial complex and revolution and capitalism has done, and many other systems, we actually don't have that capacity for compassion and empathy. And it's no wonder we're in the fuck. It's no wonder we feel stuck. And it is unearthing that inside of us first, and then watching the ripple effect of that in our relationships. How do we make sure that that calm, connected, and safety is also offered to others so that they can get into those states too? Yeah.
And when you offer it, it's easier to get it back. I mean, it's
reciprocal. It's actually instantaneous. So we automatically sync up each other in fear. We have a non-verbal way of doing that as humans. We needed that in small hunter-gathering groups because we needed to all collectively know when we had to fight or run or freeze in place. And the beautiful part of the inverse of that is we also have a nonverbal way of feeling safe together. And so when there was no threats, when we could ponder each other's experiences, when we could look at each other across the fire or over a body of water or next to a body of water in small hunter-gathering groups, we had a nonverbal way of feeling safe and tranquil too, like me and you are feeling, in this conversation. And my hope is that that is possible too, that we don't just have to be drenched in fear. We can actually drench ourselves in safety.
Yeah.
And what would that then create? What would that create?
Beautiful, beautiful idea. I have led you a merry dance because my first question is actually meant to be, what brought you to this work? Like what made you want to write this book, do the work? I suppose you've been working in therapy for a long time before writing this book, but what made you want to do this work?
The first 20 years of my life harmed me greatly. And it was around the time I was 20, I found myself forced into therapy that wasn't fit for my well-being by a religious organization. And as I navigated that and the pain of that, I then sought other help, right, throughout the years because things weren't working. And I sat with great therapists. I remember my first therapist offering me a really simple intervention around breath, noticing when I took a breath in as a sign of my self-care in great distress and feeling very out of control. I did have control over my breath. I think about, the other therapists that I've seen over the years, the last 20 years to get to here from 20 to 40. I'm 41 in about 6 days. And I always felt so safe and understood in those spaces. And I had this idea in the back of my head, could I offer this space to others? Could this be something that I could support others to do? And at that time, I was sort of navigating disability care work. I was running day program locations for 4 years in disability support. I got so burnt out by how burnt out the carers were in many ways. And I went and finished my business degree and I went into big tech. I landed a job at IBM and Salesforce.com. And at the same time as I put my psychotherapy degree on hold and I started it again, because there was always a yearning for more. I always felt like there was more to a human life than just our work and what I could earn, even though I was earning very well. I was like, I am dissatisfied. And so I always came back to that idea of, could I? And I've completed my psychotherapy degree. I started to work for myself inside of teams around technology. And then bit by bit over the last 10 years, all of that tech stuff is gone. And what I've picked up is the messy and complex human experience. And in many ways, I think I'm older and wiser enough to know now I've been doing my own healing work as I offer other people spaces for their healing. And the more and more I realized that young Andrew really needed places of safe connection, and in offering that to others is healing. It's a reciprocal healing. That the more I realize that, I think the better my therapy is. And the better that I can navigate this world too and help others navigate it. Was
there any challenges to that? I'm just reflecting when I heard you say that the first 20 of your years of your life was damaging. It sounds like your first experience of therapy could have had the potential to turn you against it forever.
Yeah.
Given it was so harmful, how did you find your way out of that? It just sounds really confusing.
I think I'm realizing something for the first time with you, Siobhan.
What's that?
Maybe maybe my attempts at empowering people in the sort of therapy that I always needed back then has been another version of my healing, because in many ways, my first experience of therapy was to be healed from my same-sex attraction inside of a church. And maybe that control, that power over me, that place for suffering, and I held that pain for many, many years. Maybe this is a revolutionary act. Maybe the last 10 years of my private practice, and I was determined to have philosophies in place and an ethos in place that the client was the expert, not me. The client directed where we went in therapy, not I. And I just wonder if we're opening up a bit of a portal to understand why these last 10 years needed to occur as an antidote to really awful, oppressive experiences with psychologists. And I'm catching a glimpse, and I'm feeling very proud of then what I have been able to make possible in freeing my client up systemically through our relationship, so that they are in agency and autonomy and control over their own stories, but also of their own choices and of their own lives. And I'll just name it, but the philosophy of narrative therapy and the practice of narrative therapy, which centers the client as the expert and allows them to tell their own story, not dominant stories to flood their lives, often the shoulds, the obligations, the musts in our lives. I've never quite seen it this way, Siobhan. Maybe we're doing my own version of therapy with you. Maybe.
Well, the other thing that is interesting about your experience to me is you mentioned that you had a job at IBM, that you were earning a lot of money, and that I'm assuming if that was, say, 10 years ago, you would have been in your late 20s, early 30s. That is a time of life that it can be very hard to make a career change, because effectively if you were going back to do psychotherapy, I'm assuming you would have lost quite a bit of income in doing that. Was that challenging? Was that something that was hard, or was it in your heart you just knew this is what you needed to do?
It was hugely challenging because I was torn between that heart of, I know I need more purposefulness, and what I'm doing is too thin. It's too transactional. But you're on a crossroads, right? You've got one foot on one side of the chasm and a foot on the other side of the chasm. One's got money on it, one's got purpose on it. How are you going to make this choice? And I ended up throwing myself at it.
The chasm, you threw yourself at.
Well, threw across the chasm, and I landed. I did land in my 2 feet, and progressively over the 10 years, I built a really healthy private practice and a way of working inside of teams that has helped to balance that reduction in income. But there's been many moments in my life where I've had to back myself and to back that resonant feeling inside of my body rather than maybe what was logical, or you could see it creating value outside, maybe economically for you, but that real feeling of what's inside your body, which needs to come out or be expressed or to be followed through with. Often that's my values. Often that's the values I've already expressed. And writing this book was another one, because I've self-published. I self-published through Hardy Grant, but I own every book. I've paid every dollar to produce this work, and it's another sort of oh fuck moment. It's like, all right, you're doing this. You're decoding 10 years of your personal story and your last 10 years of transformation. You're consolidating in a book. You're not needing mummy and daddy's permission to publish this. You're going to do it yourself, and you're going to back it. And I'm in that. I've got my feet across the chasm right now. It's like, okay, what does this become? What could this become? I know it's resonant. I know it's purposeful, and I know it needs to be written, and I know this stuff needs to be said. But okay, let's go.
So what does that feel like? Is that a mixture of fear and hope and optimism? Like, it does sound like a terrifying place to be, but is it a mixture of things or is it just overwhelming?
Such a mixture of things, because there is deep resource. Like, I feel deeply resourced by where I got to in my life to do this. I feel sort of calm and steady at the same time as I feel charged up. And I've realized that I also feel a sense of heavy pressure in being the custodian of this particular work and this particular perspective on why we are fucked and how to get out of it. And I'm also the mouthpiece now of the book, and I'm the mouthpiece of what my clients have been generous enough to share with me and what I've had to field in my life as well. And so I feel the pressure of being the mouthpiece for this at the same time. And so it's so dynamic. And there's like excitement, and then there's like, oh, bone tired, oh my gosh, And so it is all of these constellation of things. And I was on a podcast last week. It was a queer, sort of prior Christian queer podcast called Queerfully Made. It was a really great conversation. But I realized that I'm actually living in the abundance of what that Christian cult promised my 13-year-old self, that they promised abundance and, an expansive life, that you would have great friendships and relationships. You would feel well in the world because you were inside of this belief system. But it just came with all these shoulds and musts, right? These rules that in the end they abandoned me for breaking. But now, without a need for religion or a strict rule set to live my life by, I've actually been able to create the promise. I'm actually, in this life, in my current mode, I have been able to create extreme levels of abundance. And I'm not saying this is perfect. I'm not saying that I don't have really difficult and tough moments, some of them in the last few days, but it is the expansiveness of making anything possible and making these types of risky choices, these sort of bold choices in my life. But then, oh my God, the abundance and the life and I get to feel all of these things at the one time, not just hold one of those experiences at the one time. I get to have all of those emotional experiences. I think that actually is the abundance of the human experience, for sure.
We've talked about how the work you do can make the world a better place in terms of the ripple effect when people understand themselves better and can calm that nervous system and understand the world around them a little bit better, or their place within it. I'm just wondering if there's any specific impact you've seen, maybe even from the launch of your book or from talking to people who you've worked with. Is there any one story that comes to mind for you where you have just, and it might not even be a person, it might have been something that happened, where you've been able to sit there and just think, wow, the work I'm doing is making an impact?
Oh, you're going to make me cry.
Sorry, that wasn't the intention.
I am crying. No, don't apologize. I love tears, and I love the emotions rippling through my body. This is going to be a weird anecdote because I was on the Today Show on Monday morning with Carl Stefanovic and Sarah. And such a cultural zeitgeist, isn't it? The Today Show. It's like this status symbol of thought leadership and accessing the living rooms of Australia. And they use the word Aussies, in introducing you. And it's like, wow, okay, that's amazing. And to hear Carl Stefanovic, such a figure, in our country's zeitgeisty sort of media, decode the book into a really simple frame. And it's a frame that I've heard time and time again. And I'm feeling emotional because if we can fully embody this, I think a lot can change. But he said words to the effect of, Andrew argues that, the reason why things feel fucked is because at the end of the day, the world is disconnected and you are not the problem. You are not the problem here. The world is. And our systems of disconnection have infiltrated our lives, and they've infiltrated our bodies, and they've unplugged us from ourselves. A lot of times people will come to me and they will say, I'm broken. I'm fucked. I can't get this right. I'm the biggest barrier to a life well lived. And I really hope, and I've seen this in multiple conversations over the last 2 weeks, this idea emerged that, no, I'm not the problem, the world is. And that is so moving to be a part of, a small part of, helping people understand that they aren't the barrier. It's what happened to them that is. And for many of us with a certain Western white privilege, may not even be able to see it.
It's very true. Well, Andrew, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for taking your time out to have this chat.
It was a brilliant conversation, Siobhan. Thank you.
Andrew Sloan, author of Why Things Feel Fucked. You'll find links to the book in the notes of this episode. What a year it's been. I'm having a short break, but I'll be back in 2026 with more stories to fill you with inspiration. Wishing you a wonderful summer break and a new year full of kindness and hope. Bye for now.